Operation Epic Fury destroyed Iran's navy in 48 hours. The strategic implications for China and Russia are severe. The military lessons that American adversaries extracted from the operation are being integrated into their strategic calculations as we speak. But there is a cost to Operation Epic Fury that American military planners have to account for, and that cost is not being discussed in the press releases from U.S. Central Command or in the congressional testimonies from the Pentagon leadership. The fuel burned, the ordnance expended, the maintenance hours consumed, the personnel fatigue accumulated, the supply lines extended, the industrial base working at surge capacity. These are the hidden costs of Operation Epic Fury, and they are beginning to concern military planners in ways that public statements do not reflect. The Lincoln burned jet fuel in continuous combat operations for 2 weeks. The Ford burned jet fuel in sustained flight operations for the same period. The guided missile destroyers and cruisers in the strike groups expended cruise missiles and gun ammunition at rates that require immediate inventory replacement. Each Tomahawk cruise missile costs approximately $1.4 million. Operation Epic Fury fired hundreds of them. Each JSSM cruise missile costs approximately $900,000. Each El Razam anti-ship missile costs $15 million. Each Harpoon anti-ship missile costs $1.2 million. The total ordnance bill for Operation Epic Fury is measured in billions of dollars. That ordnance is not unlimited. The United States produces guided missiles at a specific rate. The defense contractors that manufacture them operate at specific capacity levels. If the military expends inventory faster than it can be replaced, the inventory depletes. The question that keeps military planners awake at night is whether that depletion is sustainable. Can the United States maintain that level of operations if China moves on Taiwan? Can America fight Iran and China simultaneously without depleting inventory faster than it can be replaced? Can America maintain operations across multiple theaters while sustaining its alliance commitments and deterring new conflicts? These are not rhetorical questions. These are critical questions with profound strategic implications. The structural reality is that American military dominance depends on American industrial capacity. The Americans have the ships, the submarines, the aircraft, the missiles, and the people to execute Operation Epic Fury. But they also have to sustain operations across multiple theaters simultaneously. Europe requires continuous military support to deter Russia. NATO commitments require the maintenance of force structure in Germany, Italy, Bulgaria, and throughout Eastern Europe. American forces are forward deployed in Europe in numbers that have not been seen since the Cold War ended. Those forces require logistics. They require spare parts. They require ammunition. They require fuel. They require maintenance support. Every fighter jet operating from German bases consumes fuel, requires maintenance, and generates spare parts demand. Every artillery battery positioned in Poland consumes ammunition and requires logistics support. Every armored battalion stationed in Eastern Europe consumes fuel and spare parts. The cumulative logistics demand for European operations is enormous and non-negotiable. The Middle East requires a continuous military presence. The United States maintains bases in Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, and throughout the region. The Fifth Fleet operates from these bases. The logistics network that supports these operations stretches from the United States across the Atlantic and Indian Oceans to the Middle East. Operation Epic Fury was executed primarily from Middle East bases, consuming logistics capacity that was supposed to support regional contingency planning. The Pacific requires even greater logistics support. The Seventh Fleet operates 70 ships from bases in Japan, South Korea, and other forward positions. The submarine force operates continuously throughout the Indo-Pacific. The Air Force maintains fighters, transport aircraft, and support aircraft at bases throughout the region. The logistics demand for Pacific operations is greater than for Middle East operations because the distances are greater and the number of forward deployed forces is larger. Operation Epic Fury drew ordnance from inventories that were supposed to be maintained for contingencies elsewhere. Tomahawk missiles that were allocated to European contingency planning were fired at Iranian targets. JASSM missiles that were allocated to Pacific contingency planning were fired in the Arabian Sea. Ordnance that was manufactured to be an inventory for a potential Taiwan conflict was expended against Iran. This is not a criticism of the decision to execute Operation Epic Fury. The decision to execute the operation was strategically correct. The decision reflected the judgment that degrading Iranian naval capability was more important than maintaining inventory for contingencies elsewhere. But the decision had costs. Those costs are now becoming visible. The defense industrial base is now working at surge capacity to replace that expended ordnance. But surge capacity is not infinite. Surge capacity is defined by the production capacity of the factories that manufacture the ordnance. Surge capacity has limits. Those limits are now being tested. Raytheon Technologies produces the Tomahawk cruise missile. Production facilities are located in Arizona and other locations. Raytheon has invested in manufacturing capability, but production capacity is finite. Lockheed Martin produces the JASSM and LRASM missiles. Production facilities are located in multiple locations. Lockheed Martin has invested in manufacturing, but production capacity is finite. These manufacturers have specific production facilities with specific production rates. The production rates are not flexible in the short term. Adding more workers requires training. Adding more factory shifts requires investment. Adding more production lines requires facility expansion. All of these take time, months to hire and train workers, months to commission new production lines, years to build new facilities. The ordnance expended in Operation Epic Fury will take months to replace. Some categories of ordnance will take years to replace. During those replacement timelines, the inventory available for other contingencies is depleted. American military planners have to account for this depletion when making strategic decisions. In the meantime, the inventory available for other contingencies is below pre-Epic Fury levels. If a crisis emerges in Europe that requires sustained cruise missile operations, the inventory of Tomahawks available for that crisis is lower than it was before Operation Epic Fury. If a crisis emerges in the Taiwan Strait that requires sustained ordnance operations, the inventory available for that operation is lower than pre-Epic Fury levels. This creates strategic vulnerability. American military planners understand this vulnerability. American planners are working to close the vulnerability through surge production. But the vulnerability exists, and strategic adversaries are watching the vulnerability develop. China is watching this industrial reality very carefully. China is calculating whether American military resources are stretched thin enough that Taiwan invasion becomes more feasible. The calculation is not based on whether America has the capability today. The calculation is based on whether America will have the capability at the moment China chooses to move. If the United States continues to expend ordnance at Operation Epic Fury rates across multiple theaters, the inventory will deplete. If China waits until the industrial base cannot replace what has been expended fast enough, the calculation becomes more favorable to Beijing. If China times its invasion of Taiwan to coincide with a moment when American inventory is depleted and American production lines are still ramping up, the tactical advantage shifts toward China. This is the calculation that the generals in Beijing are making. This is the timeline that Chinese military planners are adjusting, not based on American capability today, but based on American capability at the moment China chooses to attack. The generals are asking, when is the window of maximum American weakness? The answer being reached in Beijing is that the window exists approximately 12 to 18 months from the current date. The window is created by the fact that Operation Epic Fury depleted American inventory faster than American production can replace it. During those 12 to 18 months, American military planners have to choose which theaters to prioritize. If America prioritizes Europe, American inventory for Pacific contingencies is reduced. If America prioritizes the Pacific, American inventory for European contingencies is reduced. America cannot equally resource all theaters with the same level of ordnance that was available before Operation Epic Fury. America cannot maintain the same level of deterrence in multiple theaters simultaneously while inventory is being restored. China's calculation is that Taiwan invasion during that 12 to 18-month window would face reduced American ordnance availability. Taiwan invasion during that window would allow China to move against Taiwan at a moment when American military planners are still ramping up production to replace Epic Fury losses. The chance of American success in defending Taiwan is lower when American ordnance inventory is depleted than when inventory is at full strength. This is not certainty. This is probability. China is calculating the probability that Taiwan invasion would succeed if executed during the window when American ordnance inventory is at its lowest point and American production is still ramping up. The probability is not zero. The probability is not negligible. The probability is significant enough that Chinese military planners are adjusting their calculations based on this window of opportunity. American military planners understand this. American planners understand that the ordnance depletion from Operation Epic Fury has created a vulnerability. American planners are working to close that vulnerability as quickly as possible. American planners are increasing production, accelerating timelines, and moving resources toward ordnance production. But the vulnerability exists. And China is watching. China is watching the production timelines. China is watching the inventory depletion rates. China is calculating whether the window of maximum American vulnerability is actually opening. This is the hidden cost of Operation Epic Fury. This is not the $50 billion direct cost. This is the strategic vulnerability that Operation Epic Fury created by depleting American inventory faster than American production can replace it. This is the vulnerability that China sees and is calculating how to exploit. This is not a permanent vulnerability. American production will ramp up. American inventory will be restored. Production lines are already being expanded. Workers are already being hired. New shifts are already being commissioned. Within 12 to 18 months, American inventory will be restored to pre-Epic Fury levels. But during those 12 to 18 months, American military planners are weaker than they should be. During those 12 to 18 months, American ordnance inventory is lower than it was before Operation Epic Fury. During those 12 to 18 months, American military options are more constrained than they would be if Operation Epic Fury had not depleted inventory. China is watching the calendar. China is watching the production timelines. China is watching the months required for the industrial base to surge production and replace the ordnance. China is asking, is there a moment in the next 12 to 18 months when American inventory is depleted and American production lines are still ramping up? Is there a moment when American military capability is at its lowest point? The answer that American military planners are reaching is that such a window may exist, and that window is what China is waiting for. The conversation about the hidden costs of Operation Epic Fury is not happening in the press releases. The conversation about ordnance depletion is not happening in the congressional testimonies. The conversation about industrial capacity constraints is not happening in the public discussion of American military dominance. But the conversation is happening in the Pentagon. The conversation is happening in the classified intelligence briefings given to the President and the National Security Council. The conversation is happening in the strategic planning offices where military planners are calculating whether America has sufficient inventory to execute concurrent operations in multiple theaters. The military planners are asking hard questions. How many Tomahawk missiles can we afford to expend before we compromise our ability to respond to a Taiwan crisis? How many cruise missiles can we fire at Iranian targets before European contingency planning is under-resourced? How many aircraft can we fly before maintenance becomes unmanageable? How many personnel can we deploy before retention becomes a problem? How do we maintain strategic deterrence across multiple theaters while rebuilding inventory? These are not theoretical questions. These are practical questions with real consequences. The answers being reached in the Pentagon are not reassuring. American military dominance is real. American ordnance is powerful. American industrial capacity is greater than any competitor. But American industrial capacity is not infinite. American ordnance is not unlimited. American military dominance, while substantial, has actual limits. The limits are more severe than the American public understands. The public believes that American military industrial capacity can surge indefinitely. The public believes that the United States can sustain operations across multiple theaters without constraints. The public believes that American military dominance is unlimited and permanent. The reality is more complicated. The United States faced similar constraints during World War II. The American industrial base was straining to produce weapons for two simultaneous theaters, Europe and the Pacific. The strain was manageable because American industrial capacity had been mobilized completely. Every factory was working at maximum capacity. Every worker was committed to war production. The entire economy was mobilized for war. But that mobilization is not possible in peacetime. The American economy in 2026 is not mobilized for total war. The American defense industrial base is operating at peacetime capacity levels. Surge capacity exists, but surge capacity has limits. Surge capacity is 30 to 40% above normal capacity. That surge capacity is adequate for responses to regional conflicts. Surge capacity is not adequate for sustained major power competition across multiple theaters. China is watching this industrial reality. China is calculating the American industrial constraint. China is asking whether the window exists where American inventory is depleted and American production cannot surge fast enough to replace losses. The answer that Chinese military planners are reaching is yes, a window exists. The window is approximately 12 to 18 months from the current date. Operation Epic Fury demonstrated those limits more clearly than they have been demonstrated in decades. The destruction of Iran's navy came at a cost measured in ordnance expended. That ordnance will take time to replace. That time is what China is watching. That time is what China is waiting for. That time is when the vulnerability window is open. The challenge facing American military planners is multifaceted. It is not simply about producing more missiles, it is about maintaining strategic deterrence across multiple theaters while inventory is being restored. It is about signaling to allies that American commitment remains strong even while American inventory is being rebuilt. It is about convincing adversaries that American capability remains formidable even during the vulnerable transition period. Taiwan is watching this situation very carefully. Taiwan understands that American military capability is the foundation of Taiwanese security. Taiwan understands that American inventory depletion creates vulnerability. Taiwan is watching the American military-industrial response to Operation Epic Fury. Taiwan is asking whether American commitment to Taiwan defense remains strong even during the vulnerable window. Taiwan is also watching China. Taiwan understands that China is calculating the window of maximum American vulnerability. Taiwan understands that the period of 12 to 18 months when American inventory is depleted and production is ramping up is the most dangerous period for Taiwan. Taiwan is watching China's military preparations. Taiwan is asking whether China will attempt invasion during the vulnerability window. South Korea is in a similar situation. South Korea understands that American military capability is the foundation of South Korean security against North Korean threat. South Korea is watching American inventory depletion. South Korea is asking whether American commitment to South Korean defense remains strong. Japan is in a similar situation. Japan understands that American military capability is the foundation of Japanese security. Japan is watching American inventory depletion. Japan is concerned about the vulnerability window. All of America's regional allies are watching the situation. All are asking whether American military dominance will be maintained during the vulnerable transition period. All are hoping that American industrial production will ramp up fast enough to prevent serious vulnerability. This is the political dimension of the hidden cost of Operation Epic Fury. The military cost is ordnance depletion. The political cost is uncertainty among regional allies about whether American commitment remains strong during the vulnerable window. China is watching this political dimension as well. China is watching whether American allies remain confident in American military commitment. China is watching for signs that American allies are becoming uncertain about American capability. China is calculating whether regional allies would support American defense of Taiwan during the vulnerable window when American ordnance inventory is depleted. The answer China is reaching is that regional ally support may be less forthcoming during the vulnerable window. Regional allies may be less confident in American capability. Regional allies may be hedging their bets, positioning themselves to benefit from whoever emerges as the victor in any conflict over Taiwan. This is the deepest hidden cost of Operation Epic Fury. The military cost is ordnance depletion. The political cost is uncertainty among regional allies. The strategic cost is the possibility that America's alliance architecture in the Indo-Pacific may be weakened at the moment when alliance strength is most critical. This is the calculation that Chinese military planners are making. This is what China is watching for. This is the moment when China might move against Taiwan. This is when the vulnerability window opens and China must decide whether to attempt invasion. The vulnerability window is not permanent. American production will ramp up. American inventory will be restored. Within 12 to 18 months, American military planners will have restored the inventory that Operation Epic Fury depleted. Within 12 to 18 months, American military capability will be restored to full strength. But during those 12 to 18 months, American military planners are weaker than they should be. During those 12 to 18 months, the vulnerability window is open. During those 12 to 18 months, China has the opportunity to attempt Taiwan invasion at a moment when American military capability is constrained. This is the hidden cost of Operation Epic Fury. This is the vulnerability that Operation Epic Fury created. This is the window that China is watching. American military and political leadership understand this. American leadership is working to close the vulnerability as fast as possible. American leadership is accelerating production. American leadership is moving resources toward ordnance production. American leadership is signaling to regional allies that American commitment remains strong even during the vulnerable transition. But the vulnerability exists. The window is open. China is watching. And the question becomes whether China will attempt Taiwan invasion during the window when American military capability is most constrained. The answer to that question will determine the future of the Indo-Pacific for the next generation. The answer to that question will determine whether Taiwan remains independent or becomes part of China. The answer to that question may well be the most consequential strategic decision of 2026 and 2027. This is what no press release from the Pentagon is saying. This is what no congressional testimony is addressing. This is the conversation that is happening behind closed doors in the Pentagon and in the offices of American regional commanders. This is the calculation that Chinese military planners are making right now. The hidden cost of Operation Epic Fury is not measured in dollars. The hidden cost is measured in strategic vulnerability. The hidden cost is measured in the vulnerability window that China is watching. The hidden cost is the moment when Taiwan security hangs in the balance. This is naval depth. Subscribe and stay with us as this story continues.